talk about how to sketch the graph given the zeros and the end behavior today. The last few videos have been leading us up to this point. So we are ready to take this plunge, so to speak, and go ahead and figure out how this works. So I'm going to start you off with some examples where we are just sketching based on end behavior. I'm so sorry. And then we will figure out how to just do an entire problem from scratch, okay? So what I've done here is given you some zeros, and I want you to go ahead and draw a graph. And zeros, what's another word for zeros? X-intercepts. No, what's an x-intercept? That's just where the graph touches the x-axis. So what I want you to do, and you don't really have to be particularly precise with it, but if the numbers are small, I usually will actually count the tick marks off and put a label there. Label it no matter what. But we need an intercept on 4, -1, and +3. So those are the places where this graph is going to touch the x-axis. Now, it would be nice to know where it touches the y-axis, and it does tell us it's at -12. Now, here's what I'm talking about. This is way down here on the y-axis, and it's a little bit annoying sometimes to have to do that many tick marks. So I'm totally okay with you kind of just eyeballing it and putting a line there and then writing -12. That's fine. All right, now the other thing we're told is that the end behavior is odd negative. Well, what does that mean about this function? If it's odd negative, what is the end behavior? So let's think about what we talked in that last lesson. So if it's odd negative, remember it goes opposite directions. The right arrow tells you which way it's pointing. So we're going to go down on the right, and it's going to rise on the left. So what I want you to do is take these arrows, and I want you to draw those on your farthest left point and your farthest right point. That's the end behavior. That's the last time that graph is going to be involved with that point before it takes off forever, going to positive on y and then negative on y on this side. So really the thing you have to do is just figure out how to piece it all together. So here is the first point, down here is the first point that we come to after that intercept. So we need to go through that, and we're going to scoot back up. We've got to hit this 3, and I'm not sure how high it goes, but I know it's going to scoot back down and pass through 4 before it takes off to negative infinity. So that's how you piece that together when you're given the zeros and the y-intercepts. All right, so let's do this next example. Same kind of scenario. We're given some zeros. We're given end behavior and a y-intercept. Let's go ahead and draw a graph. All right, remember the x-intercepts, the zeros. They are the x-intercepts, and they go on the x-axis. So there's those. All right, and I like for you to label those so you know where they are, and I will know where you're trying to put them. Now our y-intercept is -5. And see how I did count the tick marks on that one because it wasn't really that laborious to go that far down. So, all right, the end behavior is even positive. And what does that look like? Well, positive means it's rising up on the right and the left. So we just need to draw this. Okay. All right, so on the left, that's the end behavior. On the right, that's the end behavior. See how I just took those arrows and transferred them over to the farthest left point and the farthest right point. And then we know that it is even positive and it passes through this intercept. See how gross my graph looks? But you know what? It's a sketch. It gets the point across. You can tell by looking at that exactly what pieces that we were given and the end behavior. So that's all you need to do on that. Alrighty, so here's what we really need to get to, and that is how do you just do all of this stuff? Like how do you find the zeros and then sketch the function and do all of that stuff? So that's what we're going to talk about. All right, so go ahead and pause this video if you're not taking notes already, and let's get some of those examples written down, these examples, so you can have something to look back on. The first thing we want to do, we got to find the zeros. The last video, we talked about how to find the zeros by making your list, all right, and then doing the test. So that's what we got to do, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. Q and P. So we need to do the factors of which one first? P, that's right. And the factors of P are plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, and plus or minus 6. Factors of Q, the leading coefficient, is just 1 and negative 1. So what are the only ones we really need to worry about? Remember, when you're dealing with a 1 leading coefficient, the factors of the constant really is the only factors you need to worry about. So let's go ahead and do some testing. And what do we test with? Synthetic division. All right, so let's test 1. That's my favorite one to start with. And remember, we're looking to see if we get a remainder of 0. And if we do, we know we have unlocked one key to the puzzle. And look, we're getting lucky. First try. All right, so there's one of your zeros. What does that mean? That's one of the x-intercepts. Okay, so when we get ready to draw the graph, that's going to be important. Okay, so when we did those other problems as well, remember we took what we got for the answer, and I dropped that exponent on the first one to be one less than the original, and then we're going to factor this. Now be careful on this one. Sometimes this little factoring job can be a little bit confusing or misleading. So the factors of 6 that I had to give you a negative 1. 3 and 2 are the winners. We need a negative 3 and a positive 2. So the next thing we did was set these equal to each other, set them equal to 0, and then figure out what the 0 version was. So that's going to be a positive 3, and this one's going to be a negative 2. So there are your zeros, aka x-intercepts. Okay, so we found the x-intercepts. The next thing we want to do, how about we find the y-intercepts? Now, how do we find the y-intercept? Well, the y-intercept is technically where the x-coordinate is a 0. So if you were to plug in a 0 for all 3 of these first terms, what's going to happen? You're going to be left with 6, aren't you? The y-intercept in these kinds of polynomials is always going to be your constant every time. So the y-intercept is 6. Okay, we've got zeros, which are x-intercepts. We have a y-intercept. What's the only thing we're missing? We need to know what the end behavior is. So go back to your problem. What is the degree here? Odd or even? Odd. What about your leading coefficient? It's positive. So let's do a little sketch of what that's supposed to look like. Remember, the right arrow tells you which way is positive or negative. That's up, and odds are opposite directions. So that's what the end behavior is supposed to look like. So let's go ahead and draw a sketch. So that's step number 4. Draw a sketch. So what I want you to do is kind of go in order of the way that we found it, okay? First thing I want you to do is plot your x-intercepts on the x-axis. And your x-intercepts are your zeros. Here we go. 1. Remember, write what the value is. We also need 1 at 3. And then we need 1 at negative 2. Mine's not drawn to scale for sure. Okay, and the y-intercept is positive 6. Well, that would be up here somewhere. I'm definitely not drawn to scale, so I'm just going to kind of sketch that. Alrighty, and then the end behavior. All right, so we did the x-intercepts first. Then we did the y-intercept, which was 6, right? Then what we're going to do is figure out the end behavior. Okay, so if it's odd, positive, you're going to take those arrows, literally. The furthest left point is what the arrow looks like on the left-hand side, so down. The furthest right point, and it doesn't matter what's going on there, it's the point that's furthest to the right, that gets the up arrow. And your job is to figure out how to piece this thing together to get from here to here. Now, you don't know how high it scoops up or how low it scoops down. You just got to piece it together. And it may not look pretty, but guess what? That's okay. We're just trying to get a sketch. All right? Go ahead and pause the video if you need to jot anything down. We got one more example to do. All right, here we go. So we're going to do one more of these, and I have no idea how tough this one's going to be. It may be a little bit harder than I want it to be, but that's all right. All right, first thing you want to do, find the zeros. Let's figure out what they are. So we're going to make our list. Plus or minus P over plus or minus Q. And you know what? If Q is 1, I'm not even going to worry about that right now because it's not going to change any of these things. So let's just look at the factors of 56. Ready? 1, 2, not 3. Let's see. 4 may go into it. I'm not real sure. I'm going to be kind of like a kid here. 7 and 8 go into it, I know. And you know what? Let's just say I'm tired of thinking and I don't want to think about those anymore. So I'm just not going to list anymore. That's okay. All right. It's probably one of these anyway. Usually the higher numbers, like 56, you know, I know that's a factor, but usually it's not going to work anyway. It's kind of uncommon for that to be one of the zeros. So let's just try one of these. Let's try my favorite. Let's try 1 first and see if that's a 0. All right. Let's see. I don't think this is going to work, y'all. All right, so 1 doesn't work. What about -1? Let's try that. Let's see. Just doing some symbolic division here. I'm going to double check my signs here. Oh, that's supposed to be negative. I knew something wasn't right. Look, it worked. Yay! All right, so that means -1 is one of those zeros. Let's list that. And what's another name for a zero? X-intercept. Yes. All right, so what I want you to do is grab your answer, factor it, find those other zeros. All right, so the factors of 56 will be 8 and 7. Let's see, I believe we need a +8 and a -7 to make this work. So that gives us a -8 for that zero and a +7 for that one. So we'll come over here and write that down. All right, so there are your zeros. All right, now what we did on the other video was we went ahead from this point and, on the other example, we went ahead on this at this point and found the y-intercept. All right, so your zeros are your x-intercepts. We need the y-intercept. Now, what did we say with how you found it? Well, technically, the x-intercept is when y-intercept is when the x-coordinate is 0. If you plugged in zeros for all those, nothing's going to matter but that -56. So it's your constant. All right. And so the last thing we need to do is figure out what is the end behavior. Okay, so it's odd, and that leading coefficient is positive. So I did give you 2 odd positive graphs, but that's okay. You don't want to get too crazy too quick, huh? All right, so we're going to plot the x-intercepts first. -1. And then we're going to go -8. Ooh, it's kind of a ways out. All right, and then we got a +7. So see how I just kind of put a tick mark there and labeled it. Don't just put tick marks and not label. You need to label, okay? And then the y-intercept, whoa, -56. That's a long way down there. Definitely not doing those tick marks. And then odd positive. So that's going to rise on the right, or the right arrow tells you positive or negative, and odds are opposites. So this first arrow is where you're going to put this. Left arrow, the first point. The furthest right point's where that right arrow is